Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. So this lesson is going to be about playing any chord anywhere on the entire neck of the guitar using one of four starting shapes. So I'm going to give you four major chord shapes, and from those four chord shapes, any of the four chord shapes, you can manipulate it into any other chord you want. You can play major chords, minor chords, inversions, diminished, augmented, seventh chords, major seventh, minor seventh, sus2, sus4, 13, 11, 9, add 11, whatever. Any type of chord you can think of, you can play. And you can play it anywhere on the entire neck of the guitar. And basically, in my opinion, it's a lot easier to memorize a few chord formulas and a few rules than it is to memorize 500 different chord shapes. Or it's much easier than referring to one of those big chord charts that has, 1,000 different chord shapes on it. For example, if I'm playing a song and I know that the song has a C add 11 chord in it or something like that, rather than saying, oh, C add 11, I don't know that, and then going on the internet to look up a shape to a C11 chord, it's far easier and far more efficient just to think, okay, this is a C add 11. Let me start out with a C major chord in this shape, make the necessary manipulations based on the rules and the chord formulas. Oh, okay, there's a C add 11 chord. And then kind of come up with the shape on your own. And you can do this anywhere on the neck, too. All right, so I'm going to talk about the four shapes first. So the prerequisite for this lesson is to know your notes on the low E string and on the A string. As long as you know that, then you can find the root for whatever chord you're trying to make. So for this lesson, we're just going to play D types of chords. So every chord that we do is going to have the root D. So because of that, we need to know where the note D is on our E string and on the A string. So the note D is right here, 10th fret of the low E string. We also have the note D right here, 5th fret of the A string. And then everything after the 12th fret repeats itself. So anything that I'm doing in this area can also be done in this area too. Everything repeats. So let me show you the four shapes. The first shape is where you locate the root with your index. So locate the root, which is the note D, right here, 10th fret with your index finger, and you're going to play this shape. This is just a basic bar chord shape spanning all 6 strings. All right, so this is also known as the E shape, and the reason it's called the E shape is because if you replace your first finger with a capo, so instead of having your first finger barring all that, and you just have a capo, and you just play the E chord, that's why it's called the E shape. So you're used to playing the E chord down here in the open position like that. Now you just play it here with the capo. But instead of playing it with the capo, my first finger is doing the same thing the capo would be doing. So this is the D major chord in the E shape. All right. The next one is going to be where we take that same root on the 10th fret, and we're going to play it with our third finger here. So your third finger is going to go on the 10th fret, and you're going to play what is known as the G shape. So this is hard to play, and don't worry, you don't have to play this full chord shape. This is your starting point, which we're going to make further manipulations to, which is going to make it's going to make sense as this video goes on. So don't worry, you do not have to play this full shape. But anyway, this is the D major chord in the G shape. It looks like this. So by itself, I can barely even play it. The reason it's called the G shape is, again, wherever my first finger is, if I don't want my first finger there, I can replace that with a capo. And then I can just play my G chord shape. I can also play a G chord shape like this with my third and pinky. It's the same thing as your open G chord down here, except it's slid up such that the root is now on the 10th fret of the low E string, which is the note D, meaning that this is a D major chord. All right, so that's your second shape, which has its root on the low E string. So 1, 2, all right, and then your next two are going to have their roots on the A string. So find the note D on the A string, right here, 5th fret, and we're going to play this shape here. This is just a basic major bar chord rooted on the A string. And this is known as the D major chord in the A shape. Why is it called the A shape? Because again, if I replace my first finger with a capo here, place my first finger with a capo, and I play this, that's the same way I would play an A chord in the open position. But I slid it up, now my root is here on the 5th fret of the A string. That's a D major chord in the A shape. The final one is a D major chord in the C shape. So you find this one with your pinky. D major chord right here, 5th fret, pinky. Play it like this. This one's not, it's a little harder to play, but it's not as hard as the G shape. So it's done like this. So that is the D major chord in the C shape. The lowest note, the root, is going to be right here, 5th fret of the A string, which is your note D. Play the rest. That is a D major chord in the C shape. If I wanted to replace where my first finger was with the capo, I could simply just play the C shape. All right, so my 4 shapes are the D major chord using your first finger in the E shape, the D major chord using your 3rd finger on the root of the low E string playing the G shape, your first finger on the root of the A string, the A shape, and then your pinky on the root of the A string playing the C shape. So those are my 4 starting shapes. From there, we're going to make our manipulations into all these other chords. I'm just going to stop right here. These shapes are coming from what is known as the caged system, and you're probably wondering, hey, there's 5 caged shapes. Why are you only talking about 4? Because I'm trying to keep things simple, so I'm eliminating the D shape of the cage system. If you want a very in-depth tutorial on the cage system, a super comprehensive tutorial, I'll post a link to my caged lesson. It's a 45-minute long lesson about that subject. Goes super in-depth on the cage system. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with too much information here, so I'm only using these 4 shapes as my starting points. So yes, these are caged shapes, but no, this is not a lesson that is going in depth about that system. The link below is about that. So we first want to look at triads. So a triad is just a root 3-5 or 1-3-5. Now what that means is it is derived from the major scale of the chord that you're trying to make. So everything comes from the major scale. Everything in this lesson is going to be a D type of chord. D major, D minor, D7, D major 7, D9, whatever. The root is always going to be the note D. So our starting point is going to be the D major scale. So looking at your D major scale, you have 7 notes. The 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th note, 1-3-5, that makes up your D major triad. So each of those 4 shapes that I showed you in the previous section only contain those 3 notes, 1-3-5. Or you could say root 3-5. I'll be saying 1, I'll be saying root sometimes, same thing. 1-3-5, root 3-5. So let's look at each of these shapes and see where the 1, 3, and 5 are in the shapes. So starting out with this E shape, where you take your index finger, put it on the root of the low E string, which is the note D, applying your E shape. So it looks like this. So if you just look at the notes, you can see this is a D, this is A, this is D, this is F sharp, this is A, this is D. There's only 3 notes there. But rather than calling them by their note names, we're going to call them by their interval names, 1, 3, and 5. That allows us to take these chord shapes and move them anywhere. So instead of playing a D type of chord, I could play an A type of chord, or a G type of chord, or an F type of chord. And as long as I know where my 1, 3, and 5 are in the shape, the movable shape, then I can make my manipulations. So D major chord, we already looked at the notes. So here's your 1, here's 5, here's 1, here's 3, here's 5, and here's 1. So that's going to apply no matter where you play the shape at. The 1s, 3s, and 5s are going to be in the same location no matter what. So know where your 1s, 3s, and 5s are for that shape. Then we'll do the same thing for the G shape. So this funky G shape, you have your 1, you have your 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, and then 1. That's the G. So the next shape is going to be this shape here. D major chord in the A shape. So you have your 1, you have your 5, you have your 1, you have your 3, and you have your 5. So that's that one. So then you have your C shape. So you have your 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. Each one of those shapes that I showed you was just a D major chord consisting of the root, the third, and the fifth. Now, let's make some manipulations to them. The first thing I want to do is just kind of simplifying things because some of these shapes are pretty hard to play, especially the G shape. So knowing that a major chord is a root, third, and fifth, and as you can see that some of these shapes have, multiple roots or multiple fifths or multiple thirds or whatever, you don't need to. You can eliminate some of those notes. So let's just start out with this shape here. Let's start out with the D major chord in the E shape, or just a basic bar chord, whatever you want to call it. So instead of playing all 6 strings, let's just eliminate this low E string and the A string and just play the high 4 strings. All right, so I still have my root, third, fifth, and root. All right, so I made that one easier. So let's say I want to eliminate this high root. I still have my root, third, and fifth. So now it's just a 3-note chord. So I'm still playing a D major chord. So I can make the same manipulations to any of these shapes if I want to. Let me start with this G shape. This G shape's kind of weird. So rather than trying to play it across all 6 strings, why don't I just play the root, third, and fifth? Here's a root, here's a third, here's a fifth. Or maybe I might want to play root, third, and fifth. All right, so that is the low. If I'm just playing just those 3 right there, I'm still playing a D major chord, but the note D is not the lowest note anymore. So that would actually be called what is known as an inversion. So when a note other than the root note is the lowest note, it's known as an inversion. So I'm still playing root, third, fifth. It's just an inversion, but it's still a D major chord. Whether you're playing a D major chord or whether you're playing an inversion of the D major chord, it's still a D major chord. So that's a D major chord right there, simplified out of this much more complicated G shape. All right. And then you can do the same type of thing with the A shape or the C shape. So know where your roots, thirds, and fifths are in each of these 4 shapes that we're using in this lesson. Know that if you have the root, the third, and the fifth together, that's all you need. Anything else that you repeat, it's just icing on the cake, but you don't need it. If you have the root, the third, and the fifth there, you are playing the major chord. You are playing the triad. So any of these shapes can be simplified to just 3 notes. So now let's make some alterations and turn them into some other chords. So the 4 types of triads that there's major triads, which we're looking at right now. There's minor triads, there's diminished triads, and there's augmented triads. Those are the 4 types of triads. You can take any of these 4 starting shapes and play any of these triads out of those shapes. So let's start off with this shape right here. So simplifying things, just playing the high 4 strings. And even simplifying things further, just playing the D string, G string, and B string. So let's make this a minor chord. So you would need to know the minor chord formula. If the major chord formula is 1, 3, 5, minor is 1, flat 3, 5. So the only difference between a major chord and a minor chord, or a major triad and a minor triad, is the third. It's a flattened third. So if this is 1, 3, 5, this is 1, flat 3, 5. So this is now a minor triad. Major, minor. So you can apply this to the whole entire shape too if you want. So in this particular shape, you have a root, fifth, root, third, fifth, root, or 1. Root and 1, same thing. 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. So there's only one instance of a 3 in this particular shape. So the 3 is right here. So if I lower that by 1/2 step to get that flat third, keeping the 1 and the 5 consistent everywhere else, this is a minor chord. Major, minor. All I did was change the third by 1/2 step. So you can make that same manipulation to any of these other chord shapes. So I'll just give you one other example of another shape. Let's say I want to do it to this shape. I want to play the D major chord in the A shape. So you do that, locate your root with your index finger on the A string. There's your note D. So there's that D major chord. So 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. So if that's the 3, I just have to lower that by 1/2 step, keeping everything else the same. That's a D minor chord. D major, D minor. See how this is working? So try that with the C shape, try that with the G shape. Just find your third, lower it by 1/2 step. The result is a minor chord. Let's look at a diminished and augmented now. So let's start off with this shape again. So a diminished chord is a 1, flat 3, flat 5. So if you know where your 1, 3, and 5 are, when you take your 3, you'll lower it by 1/2 step. You take your 5, you'll lower that by 1/2 step. The result is a diminished triad. So let's start out with this. Let's just start out with the high 4 strings. So 1, 3, 5. So let's make it 1, flat 3, flat 5. That's a diminished triad now. So let's take this and make it an augmented triad. An augmented triad is a 1, 3, sharp 5. So starting with this shape, playing just the high 4 strings. So here's a 1, here's a 3, here's a 5. Raise that 5 by 1/2 step. That's what the sharp 5 means. So that would be a D augmented chord now. So I just made that manipulation to this shape. You can go ahead and do the same exact manipulation to the G shape, the A shape, the C shape, or if you want to do the full cage system and use all 5 shapes, the D shape too. Alright, so this video is running a bit longer than expected, so I'm going to save the rest for part 2, which will be coming out in maybe 2 days or so. So in part 2, we'll talk about 7th chords, we'll talk about sus chords and extended chords. So basically taking the same concept where you start out with your major triad or your major chord shapes, you make manipulations to create these other chords. So all that will be in part 2. Stay tuned a couple days from now. See you next time. Thanks for watching.